Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Best of Book Marketing podcast. We are so excited today because this topic, people have been asking us to do an episode on book cover design for ages. So we are so excited to be joined by our guests who we'll introduce in a little bit, but we will talk about, look at tips from the experts. You will from the talented team that made Lainey's new cover. So we're going to talk about it more generally, and then we're going to dive into specifics about good covers. Our guest has a hard stop, so we're going to keep it moving and lively today. So I guess we can just jump into updates. I don't know if you want to go first on your updates, Lainey.
Sure. So my biggest update is that I got my rights back. I mentioned this a couple of months ago to The Exit Strategy, which was my debut novel that came out 5 years ago. And tomorrow, on September 15th, while we're recording this tomorrow, it's coming out as a new edition with a new cover. So this is actually a really fun episode for me because we have the head designer of the team that worked on my cover, who happens to be really good at book covers in general, but also happens to have worked on mine. So I get to share the insider experience of what that was like, putting a new cover on a book that's 5 years old, the thought process, what I learned from it. So it's always fun when we can learn from our own experience. And the other thing I did in the last month is you can almost still see the blue hair. I went to Burning Man, which was an absolute blast. And I'm very proud of myself that I went completely phone free, stuck the phone away, phone and alcohol free for the whole time that I was there. And we had an absolute blast and felt great and had just the best time. Despite the storms, despite the mud, it's all true. You saw it all, but it was not nearly as bad as the headlines written by people who weren't there. So if anyone ever wants to ask me questions about that, happy to answer. But those were kind of my big things. And I'll share that what's really special, because as you know, I'm here in Mexico, in San Miguel de Allende, which happens to be known as the cradle of independence, because the independence of Mexico actually started in this region of Mexico. So I will be becoming an indie author, my own independence in publishing on Independence Day in Mexico, which I think is kind of fun.
That is super fun, Lainey. We are happy to join for you to join the ranks of indie, and the cover is amazing. Can't wait to get into that conversation. I'll be really quick. I am finishing the rewrite of my book, of my second edition of my first novel, Leveling Better, tonight. I will finish that tonight and after our recording, and super excited that I'll go up to like one beta reader, and then hopefully to get going on the cover with my cover designer. Also, really quick, I just wanted to mention something that's been coming up a lot in author chats, and about a note to folks about AI scams. There are a lot of emails going around right now where people will email you and they look like they know your book, they know your story, they want to do some kind of promotion, they want to do some kind of offer. These are fake, folks. These are mostly generated by AI. I see so many comments where people post them in, on Facebook or whatever. Please be confident that these are not real. Book deals are very hard to come by. People will not be emailing you randomly out of the blue. So if you get one of these emails, please be confident that it is not real. Don't give money to anybody. Don't respond to those offers. I just wanted to kind of mention that because I've been posting a lot in forums lately about this, and I just wanted to bring it to our audience here as well.
And, we talked about trying to get Victoria from Writer Beware onto the podcast at some point.
Yeah.
She did a great article just like around about a month ago about this. And I'll tell you, one of the ways you can spot it, it's a little sad, but the first thing you get is an email from another author, and they're like massively complimenting your book. And it's a little too much and a little too much detail. And if you think about it, like if I was going to write to Paulette and say, I loved your latest book, I'm probably going to write 3 lines, honestly. Like, Paulette, I read your book. Here's what I liked about it. I'm not going to write 4 paragraphs. 4 incredibly articulate, very respectful, very detailed paragraphs. That is written by AI. I'm sorry to say that if it's that long and amazing, it's made up. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I know it feels good, but we just wanted to get that. So yes. Without further ado, let us introduce our guest. Our guest today is Damon Freeman. He is the founder and creative director of Damonza, a studio dedicated helping authors give their books the best possible shot at success. After nearly 2 decades in design and advertising, he stumbled into book career design in 2011 and never looked back. His team is super busy. They did Lainey's cover. They did so many people we know their cover. We're just so excited to have Damon with us. Thank you, and welcome to the Best of Book Marketing podcast, Damon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really happy you guys invited me on. Thank you.
Yay. And I'm going to show you just for context, because we'll talk a little bit about my own cover during this, but I thought it might be interesting for people to see what the old version and what the new version looks like. So I have it here. So for those of you who are listening to this on audio, you're just going to have to go find it on Amazon. It's The Exit Strategy by Lainey Cameron, but this is the original cover from 5 years ago. It has a lot of light tones, a lot of light, kind of light coffee, soft vibes to it. And this is the new cover that just is coming out tomorrow. And it's got blues like you tend to see in women's fiction. It's much more dynamic. It's much more punchy. It looks a lot fresher. So I'll answer questions as we go through this, but it may be interesting for people to see how different your cover can be for the same book. The book has not changed at all. So let's start with a little bit of history about you, Damon. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal experience as a book designer and what attracted you to come into the field to start with?
I kind of fell into it. So a long time ago, many years ago, I was part of an advertising agency, and we focused actually mainly on sports-related advertising. So there was a lot of kind of emotive kind of advertising that we try to do to get people built up for sports. And I started sort of dabbling in other kinds of design. Actually, what I was doing was trying to get extra money. So I was pitching all kinds of different design things, and there was a website. It's called 99designs.com.
Oh, yeah.
And what that was you could, designers could go in and pitch, right, a design for any kind of design related service, and there were posters and websites and logos and book covers. And I found that when I was pitching for book covers, I had a much higher success rate of winning those pitches. So I just started to focus more and more on book covers. And I found that the way that emotive advertising worked for sport also works for book covers, to get that immediate emotion as somebody looks at a cover. So I just started focusing more on book covers and less on all those other bits and pieces. And eventually, that's all I was doing, only doing book covers. And I left my advertising career and just focused purely on book cover design. Yeah, and then that was 14 years ago, and haven't looked back since then.
So talk to us a little bit. Why are book covers so important to the success of a title? And I'd love to also know if there's common mistakes that you see people making with their book cover design.
Well, I mean, that's often the first impression, right? The very, very first time somebody sees or hears about your book. And in that very, very first impression, people make a judgment, right? So they're going to compare, your book it's not often seen on its own. It's usually seen next to other books, right? And whether it's on a bookshelf in a bookstore or on an Amazon page, wherever it might be. So it's important that your book looks like it belongs there and it fits with those other books. Otherwise, people are just going to scroll past it. They're not going to notice your book. If your cover isn't good enough, people are just going to always assume it's not as good as the books next to it, right, on the bookshelf or on that Amazon page. So it's important that it's good. It works for the genre. And I guess that's the mistake that I often see, is sometimes that somebody might design or have a good cover design, but it doesn't actually work for that genre. So there's sort of misleading impressions that it could potentially give a reader.
Right. And what makes for a good cover? Like, if you were to break it down and say, like, here's the 4 things or 3 things you need to think about as an author that make up a good cover for your book.
So the things that I look at or I consider is tone, right? So the tone of the cover really meaning, does it look like the genre, right? Does it fit within the genre? Does it match up with reader expectations for that genre? Relevance, are the things, so tone, relevance, are the elements that are on this cover actually relevant to this book, right, and to the story? Attractiveness, attractiveness is the first one. Is it attractive to potential readers, right? Is it, at the end of the day, an ugly cover is going to turn people away, right? Interest, is it interesting, right? Are people going to sort of, as their eye is moving across the page or on the bookshelf, is it going to attract interest? Is it going to catch their eye? and then very importantly, typography, right? So is it legible? Typography is one of the aspects where it can make or break a cover, and it's probably the most common part of a cover where self-published authors may struggle, right? It's when I'm looking for cover designers to work with and to hire, you can find people that can do amazing artwork, but the typography just doesn't work. Right? They can't get it. So those are the 5 elements that I would say make a cover good: the tone, relevance, attractiveness, interest, and typography. Right? Trait. That's what I call it. Trait. TRAIT.
I have a follow-up question on typography, because I've shared with Paulette in the past that fonts are the devil to me. I hate fonts. Like, I swear, when I'm in hell, I'll just have to choose fonts all day. So, like, any tips for, and I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, it's so interesting. When I see like a bad self-published cover, it's the fonts, right? I instantly know that it was done without a professional designer, without a very skilled designer. And it's always the fonts that give it away. But I can't tell you why, because I'm hopeless with fonts, right? I just know looking at it, it just doesn't look right. Can you give us any tips on like, what are the mistakes that people make with fonts? Like, if someone is designing their own cover or they don't have a very skilled designer, how do we get around this issue of the fonts making it look super amateur?
I think what it is that as we've, well, certainly for me, as growing up with computers and, in the past, word art and, Word documents and the sort of standard fonts that you would get with every computer growing up. And when you're at school, you're doing your projects and you're using the very, very standard fonts. For me, it's not those fonts and those looks start to get associated with those kinds of, I don't know, let's say amateur applications of those fonts. And then I think what happens is now, later on in life, people just don't recognize that there are tens of thousands of font options out there, much, much better than those standard ones that come with the computer, when you buy it. But new designers or authors that are designing their own covers perhaps don't know that. So they start to use those fonts that, whether it's Times New Roman or, Comic Sans, whatever it might be, that's all they know. So that's what they use.
Arial.
Yeah, exactly. So for one, I guess one of the aspects is in terms of font selection, is choosing fonts that are so generic that it just immediately gives the impression of this is a school report or a PowerPoint presentation cover or whatever it might be. So, that's the one aspect. Then the other part of it is sizing, right? So typography and sizing. Too many authors make the text too small, right? That is one of the most common errors I find with self-published covers or even professionally designed, but poorly professionally designed covers, is that the font is too small.
That's great. I think I've definitely found those same two things. So talk to us a little bit of composition. This is something that I've always found super interesting. I have a little bit of a background in design, and I just find that how the elements are arranged on the cover makes such a big difference with the visual hierarchy and those things. Can you talk to us a little bit about how good composition on a cover can make a really big difference for people?
Sure. Well, depending on the genre, perhaps it's a little bit different, but I like to start it with typography, right? To start there, because that's going to be the most important. Well, not the most important, but that's going to be very important when it comes down to it. When potential readers looking at it at a thumbnail size cover, they need to be able to see what that title is. The typography itself already gives an impression of the kind of book that it is. You're not going to have a flowing cursive for a book on business strategy, right? It's just so the typography, the color, the contrast, and the hierarchy of those things. So I would admit, I would say that the typography first, the title first, and then building a feeling from it using color and contrast. You can just have a beautiful color and pattern on a cover with type, with big strong typography, and it'll be a very, very effective cover. And that happens all the time, and you're seeing it more and more in recent times, where you'll just get a beautiful color, beautiful pattern, big type, and that's the cover.
Yep. So follow-up question for you about composition, because I've often seen people aiming for like a Z eye tracking, or is there a specific composition arrangement that you find, given, for especially for e-commerce and Amazon? I've heard Z a lot. Is that something you go for? You're not kind of wedded to that necessarily?
I'm not wedded to that. I mean, I think for the most part, your very, very first impression of a book is going to be that thumbnail size, right, of the cover. And that's tiny. And you're not looking at it, you're seeing it in one shot, and you're seeing 5 of them at the same time next to each other, right? So I don't think you're really analyzing that cover in that way. The one thing I do think is that authors, or many people kind of think, all right, you've got to have the title at the top, the author name at the bottom, and in the middle you have your image. In reality, that's not usually how it works, right? Usually the title's in the middle, and the author name might be above that or below that, but the title and the image should be one cohesive, single, whole element that you see in one shot. It's not separating the title, then the image, then the author name. They really all have to work together in one cohesive focal point.
That's one of the errors I see, actually, is, well, not an error, but a sign of a kind of amateurish cover is it's like they're all separate elements, right? They don't want to risk putting the text over the image. And so the text is completely separate and not overlapping the image. And one of the feedback I've given to people a lot of the times when they show me their covers, I'm like, try putting the text on top of the image just a little bit, just overlap it a little so it doesn't look like 2 separate things.
Yeah, absolutely. And they all should work together. You shouldn't even be questioning how is it working, or what's not. You shouldn't be noticing separate things. They should just be one cohesive cover.
So I have a question for you. Sorry, do you have a thought first?
No, I love that idea of just kind of like, overlapping. And
so I have a question for you about cover comps, because you talked about genre, and I'm going to go back to my old cover here as an example. So this cover, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. It conveys a tone. What's wrong with it is it doesn't convey the right tone for my book. My book is like fierce, feminist, like uplifting, fast-paced. Nothing about this cover says any of those things. But the other thing that was really interesting as I came back to it is, just like 5 years ago, I did not have good cover comps. And I really struggled with being able to say, like, here's 2 covers of books that are very similar to mine. And if I had a cover somewhat similar to this, it would be awesome. And I knew it was going to be hard for that reason. That's a really hard thing for the design team. If you can't say, like, here's 2 really good cover comps or 1 really good cover comp, I think you're putting it on the design team to invent it from scratch, and it's really hard on them. But I want to get your take on this, like cover comps, like you ask for them for your design agency. Any tips? Like, they're important, right? Like, what should people look for in a cover comp?
Yeah, cover comps are important, maybe a little bit more important. And I'm only actually realizing this now, sort of crazily, sort of 12 years down the line, is maybe more important than cover comps are book comps. Give us examples of other books that preferably a really popular best-selling book, that somebody who read that book is going to enjoy your book, right? So then we can go, all right, we need to create a link in this person's mind between this super popular, book that's done really, really well and your book, and we can look at the cover of that book and kind of get a feel for what the tone was of that book from the cover, and try to replicate that tone with your book as well. So yeah, it's important to get cover references, less so for the book itself, but more to see you as an author. What kind of style do you like? What do you want? It's important that you also like your own cover. So we like the cover references to see what kind of artistic feel that you have, or that you want to see in your cover. And it also helps to have the book comps to get a feel for the actual tone of this book that we designed.
And it really does matter in genre, right? You mentioned earlier, it needs to look like a genre fit. And what I spent a lot of time doing, because Damonza gave me some fabulous covers, there were multiple options, was taking those pictures and putting them in the Amazon category with all the other covers that are in the same category that my book was going to be in. And so, for example, this book fits in divorce fiction, it fits in feminist fiction, it fits women's fiction, contemporary women's fiction. And I would take screenshots of like the contemporary women's fiction, and then take the potential cover drafts and put them right there in the middle and say, does that fit or doesn't it fit? And that's a big reason that we ended up with a blue and a tealish color, because if you go look at contemporary women's fiction or you go look at divorce fiction, it's full of blues and contemporary women's fiction. And so that was important to me because I wanted my book to look like it fit right there in the genre. And especially because it is a little bit different and it's set in the workplace, I needed it to look like it belonged. And that was very important to me. And it was actually one of the things that ultimately disqualified some of the other draft covers, is putting them in the category and going, it's a beautiful cover, but it doesn't look like the other covers in this category. Or it doesn't have to look the same, but it has to look like it belongs in the category.
Yeah.
And I think that's, oh, sorry, go ahead, Damon.
No, I was going to say, I remember that process. We went through quite a few, but I think part of it was also because we're trying to, often what we might try and do is when we're presenting a few different options. So we might try to, okay, well, let's do one or two that kind of fit, and then maybe look at a third one that's, we also believe fits, but maybe just is a little bit different, right? A little bit more unusual. And that process of getting feedback on all those drafts is really what gets us to the final cover that everybody's happy with.
And we'll talk a little bit later about testing, because I had to test them because I got to a point where I was just bewildered and I didn't know what to do. Like, I had covers that I loved, but they didn't look like the genre exactly. And I was like, do I take a little bit of a risk and go with this beautiful, like memorable cover, right? Like, the people will remember because it looks so unique, but it maybe doesn't look like everything else in the genre. Or do I go with something that maybe is a little closer fit to the genre, but maybe not as unique? And it was actually a hard one. And I actually think it's a little bit like, you know how the combination of your title and your cover and your book description all work together? I think it's a little bit like that, in that if your book is a little bit of an odd duck, you maybe don't want to go with a cover that makes it even more of an odd duck. You maybe want to go with a cover that helps people say, okay, but I might like it like this other thing. Whereas if your book is kind of like fits right into the category and looks like every other book, maybe you can be a little bit more daring and put a cover on it that actually shows what's different about it. I don't know. It's just my personal theory.
What are your thoughts on that? I thought that's a great question, Damon.
Well, I think at the end of the day, what is the job of the cover, right? All the cover has to do is to get somebody to click on it or pick it up. That's it, right? Because after that, the description and the Amazon page or the blurb on the back, that's the next job, right? To sell what it is. So I think if your cover, however the cover is, you just need to be able to get that click, right? And that could be because it's, wow, this is a really interesting and unusual cover, or wow, this looks exactly like the kind of book I really like to read, right? So those are your two ways of getting that click. And that's really the most important part. I think that's just going to be the focus the whole time.
So a question for you about experience with designers, because sometimes, especially if people are, trying to save money, or, you work with people they know, they say, oh, I know someone who knows a designer. What is the type of design experience that authors should look for a cover designer? Because not all design is the same as, book covers.
Yeah, and that's difficult and problematic, and I understand that. I know when I'm looking for, I placed a job ad for a cover designer recently, and I had 200 applications, and not one of them was able to do what I needed them to do from those, because graphic design is not the same as cover design, and it really is about marrying that conceptual, I guess, work with the typography to make it all work as one unit, one thing that works. So often you get guys that are amazing illustrators or good with Photoshop, whatever it might be, but just fall down on that typography. On the other hand, you might get people that are really good with layout and all of that, but that conceptually they're just not really able to come up with something that's interesting and unique and all of those kinds of things. So it's difficult to find a experienced cover designer in that sense, unless that's what they've been doing for however long. And even then you'll find people that say that they're cover designers, and they are cover designers, but there are just different levels of cover design that you get out there. Ultimately, for the most part, unfortunately, it can be quite expensive to get a very, very good cover designer that knows what they're doing and is able to deliver on really, I guess, giving you the best outcome for your book.
I do think looking at past covers really matters, right? Like, if you look at their portfolio of work and you can't imagine your cover being part of that portfolio of work, it's probably a good sign they're not the right team for you. Like,
yeah, that's true, but also, I mean, it's difficult to judge it, right? You almost have to see, I guess the best way to do it is probably to look at covers online and see, all right, these are successful books, right? Who designed these covers? As opposed to somebody who's got nice designs in their portfolio, but when you look up those books, whatever it might be, it's got no readers or so very few reviews or downloads. It's just difficult to judge objectively. I think I guess that's what it is.
It's fair. Look at the success of the books.
Look at the success of the books and see who designed those covers. I mean, I guess that's not always easy to find out because authors don't always put who the cover designers were, on the insides of their books.
That tells you something there too. I always put my cover designers in my book.
I do.
Yeah. And you don't. I mean, we don't insist on it or anything like that. So, I mean, it's just people sometimes just don't think about it.
So, Lainey, do you want to do that question about?
Oh, sure. So I just went through this. I didn't exactly have a choice about recovering my book because my first publisher that I got my rights back from owned my first cover. So, I mean, I could have gone back and renegotiated to get the rights to that artwork, but I knew it needed to change anyway. Part of why I knew it needed to change is, one of my theories was I had applied multiple times for a book pub, and I never could work out why it was getting rejected until I was at a conference, and it was shared with me that the most common reason that you get rejected from book pub, if none of the other reasons make sense, they've got a great list on their website where they say, like, these are the 10 things we're looking for. If you match all the 10 things and you still keep getting rejected, someone shared with me that it's probably the cover, that the cover doesn't look in genre enough. And that's one of their standard, like if they take a look at your cover once and decide it doesn't look in genre, they're just going to keep rejecting you off like right away. And that was what happened to me. So it's going to be interesting to see if that changes with this new cover. But my question for you, Damon, is how do you know when it's time to recover a book? Like, how do you know that this cover is not serving my book as best it could?
I mean, it's difficult to be objective, right? And that's really what's required. It's very difficult to be objective about your own cover, about your own work, especially if you've spent time and effort and money producing that cover, and perhaps you think your book's doing well, but in reality, the cover might not be doing it justice. And you're probably your family and friends, they're not going to tell you that it's, the cover's not right or whatever it might be. So I guess if you're not getting the sales you expect, and even then, right? How do you know what sales to expect, right? I would imagine if you're advertising, right, and your ads maybe on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be, if they're not getting the click-through rate that would be expected for that kind of ad or that genre, then one of the possibilities is that your cover is not drawing people in like it should or like it could. It's different if they click on the ad and then they go to your page and then maybe they don't buy the book then. Well, then maybe it's your blurb, right? Or maybe the cover is not an accurate representation of the book if they get to that point and then don't buy. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things, but it's difficult to be objective with those kinds of things.
And I'm going to put a little plug in for your team here. We had it at the end, but I'm going to put a plug in now that you do this amazing thing where you do cover reviews at no charge for people, where you will actually look at their cover and tell them whether or not you think it's a good cover for their book or performing for them. And this was actually what convinced me to go with Damonza. I put in for a free cover review, and Damon's feedback, where he kind of got my book and said, well, this cover doesn't really match the tone of what I'm saying your book is. That was what convinced me that this agency understood my book and would be able to work with me on what I think was a really hard cover. Like, my book isn't quite on genre. It's a little bit quirky. It's a little bit different. And I think that made it a really difficult cover to get right. And so I was very selective. And I thought that your feedback on that free cover review, really, that was what made me feel very confident moving forward. So it's on the episode page. We have the link to how you can get that free cover review if you'd like to do that.
Yeah, sure. And those are can be very beneficial. Look, at the end of the day, most 90% of the people that are submitting their covers for review already know that it's not right. That's why they're submitting it for the review. So, I mean, the fact that they're taking that step to submit a cover for a review, they've already got doubts. And as I say, 90% of this time, those doubts are well-founded because the covers do need work and changes.
So we're going to pause for a moment for our sponsor break. And after that, we're going to go a little bit deeper into Lainey's experience on her covers. And we'll also ask that question about AI. I know people are concerned about that. So we'll ask that question. But we have an amazing sponsor this week, Lainey.
I don't know if I'm a sponsor this week, but we want to thank our past sponsor, Lynn Galadner, who was our sponsor for the last 3 episodes. And Lynn has this fabulous retreat in San Miguel coming up in January, which you can still go learn about. I'll just talk for a minute about my program for people who want to learn how to launch their book successfully. It's called 12 Weeks to Book Launch Success. And over 12 weeks, I work with you to build your launch plan. So every week you get a live class from me, everything from branding to how to set up your book, to how to get your Amazon keywords right, to how to do PR if you want to do your own PR, to how to get social proof, how do you reach out to other authors, how do you reach out to podcasts, how do you reach out to reviewers and influencers. One of my big things is I don't want you to do it all. What we're going to do in each area, we actually have a framework with 4 parts, which starts with your foundations. And then we go into awareness and social proof and giving your reader a reason to act. We talk about covers as well. But one of the things that I say is I don't want you to do it all. When we get into an area like awareness, I give you a list of 50 things you should do or could do. And then I want you to pick 3. And like, I'm adamant as we build people's plans, I will actually work with you personally to say like, of this list of 50, there's the 3 that I think might make sense to you. And no, you can't have 4 because people drive themselves absolutely crazy trying to do too much. And half of it doesn't work. And you just make your brain explode. And instead of writing your next book, you're spending all your time doing stuff that's a waste of your energy. So that's my big thing with this program is build a plan that will successfully launch your book, not anybody else's book, your book. I have registration open this week for a group that starts just at the beginning of October. And then it's not going to open again until next year. We'll have a group starting in March 2026. And each group is small. It's only 10 people. There's a scholarship program. If you're from a group that is traditionally underrepresented in publishing, you may be able to get a no-fee spot, as in you don't have to pay at all for the program. So I do encourage people to apply for the scholarship program. I will tell you that the people who come in from the scholarship are some of the best students who bring the most to the groups. And so I love having the scholarship program for that reason. And also because some of us have a harder, not me, some people in this world have a harder time getting published and getting attention to their books. And it's often people from groups that are underrepresented historically because it's easier to model something that was already done than to be the first in a category or to be one of the first few in a category, whatever that group is. And so that's why I like to try and help. If you're trying to break through and you're maybe from you've got a book that doesn't look like something else that's out there, I want to help you work out how to find its place in the world and its readers. So that gives me so much joy. I love running this program. I just have so much fun doing it. I have at this point had 30 plus authors who've gone through it. I think every single one is a testimonial. So if you go to my website, you can actually go look and read the testimonials from the 30 plus students in 3 groups so far. Like I said, I love it. Even if it's not a fit right now, you might want to get on the wait list because it does tend to sell out. So I'll be running it again next year. And I always start with the wait list. And that's all I have to say. You can find all the details at laineycameron.com. And let's get back into book covers.
Yes. Awesome. So AI is a big topic these days everywhere. And I just was curious kind of what your thoughts, the pros and cons on AI graphic design and how do you approach AI in the work for your team at Damonza?
Right. So I mean, we see AI as a tool like Photoshop is a tool, or like stock photos are a tool. That's probably a better way of doing things. So for the past 12 years, right, we've used stock photos, composites of stock photos, and text, and combining all of those different images from stock photo libraries and all of those kind of things, right? Rights managed images, all of those pre-existing images to create cover designs, right? And when AI came along, well, now with generative AI, we use it as an opt-out optional tool, where if we can't find the right images for from stock images, we might use AI to help with that process. And we don't do it if an author doesn't want us to use AI. We don't have a problem with that. Our experience has always been in the past not using AI. So kind of when we sort of implement it now, where required or where necessary, if we feel it will make a better cover, then we make sure we have the buy-in from the author before doing any of that. We understand it can be controversial, and that's fine. We don't have a problem with not using AI. Sometimes there are times when it's just not possible for us to create a particular kind of cover without using AI, because we're not 3D modelers or illustrators. If you want a picture of a gigantic creature with a rhinoceros head and a flamingo body, then we have to use AI to create something like that, because we just don't have those kinds of images in any other way. So we don't have a problem with using AI where necessary to get the right images. And ultimately, it makes for, where we can use it and where it's helpful, it makes for a vastly improved book cover. On the other hand, if it looks like it was if it was created with AI, then you completely undo the effect of the cover. So that's the other side of it, right? It's a useful tool, but as soon as somebody's looking at your cover and go, oh, that was made with AI, well, then the cover's not doing its job, right? Because nobody should be thinking about how the cover was made. It's the same as if somebody looks at your cover and goes, oh, well, I've seen this stock photo 10,000 times on other covers. Well, why are they thinking about stock photos, right? It's the same. Why are they thinking about AI? They should just be thinking about your book. So when we create a cover, whether or not we use AI or a stock photo or however it's done, we never want people to be thinking how the cover was made. It's always going to be, oh, this looks like a cover or a book that I might love to read.
So I'm going to jump into a question that was Paulette's question, because it kind of follows in from here. So what do you ask from authors when they're setting your team up for success? What do they give you to start off with? What do you need the most?
So we have to have a good understanding of the genre, right? So sometimes what happens is an author might, not often, but sometimes it happens where an author might sort of brief us and then give us quite a broad genre or a genre that doesn't, and then a description, but it doesn't sound like it matches up. So maybe they've described the book in one way and they've listed it under a certain genre, but either they're not clear on what the genre is or the description is not quite right. So for us, it's very, very useful to get an accurate genre, a good description, key elements, meaning we're not going to read the book, right? So we design 100 covers a month, right? We're not going to read the book to create this cover. So we need to get a good idea of what are some key moments, or key elements, or key items, or important parts of this book that could appear on a cover in one way or another. If there are people, if you want people on the cover, we need sort of character descriptions. What do they look like? We might not put people on, but if they did, we want to make sure that it's a reasonably accurate representation of the people that appear in the book. As we discussed, sort of cover references, so we can see the kinds of covers that you like, the style. Make sure if you're really into photorealism, then we're not going to give you an illustrated cover, but it's good for us to see that you're really into photorealism or bright colors or contrast or whatever it might be, as well as reference comps for book references of tone and genre, other books within that genre that you could see your book alongside in the bookshelf.
So after you hand over all that kind of background information that you're going to use to really understand what the title is about, like what as designers do you do next? Like what comes first?
So, I mean, I guess it would be research, but we're always doing that, right? So it's research of what is in the genre. Who is this book for, and what do the bestsellers within that genre, what do they look like? We need to make sure that this book fits in with those books. For us, that's the most important part. This book needs to look like it's already a bestseller within the genre, right? So that a reader that's coming, they're confident that they're going to read something that's a really amazing book. So we want to make sure it looks like it's a really amazing bestseller within that genre. So the first step would be research to make sure that it's, or to make sure we have a clear understanding of that genre. And then, we put together the first draft options, depending on the package that's ordered. That could be between 1 and 4 first drafts. They from our side, we try to get them as close to finished products as, we're not giving sketches or things like that. They finished designs that we're providing. And then the main part of really the process after that is the feedback, right? So once we get that feedback on those first drafts, that really guides most of it, because then we see, okay, well, we got this wrong, or we got that right, or this part of this draft is good, but I prefer that part of another draft, or whatever it might be. So the feedback process after we send those first drafts is probably the most important part.
And how should we give you feedback? Like, what is the best way for authors to give feedback to a designer or a design team?
I'll tell you, it's something between the two extremes that we sometimes get, right? There's the one part of, I don't like it, right? So I don't like it, do something else. Okay, so that doesn't help us. On the other hand, on the other side of it is, I don't like it, or whatever it is, I do like it, whatever it might be, but now do these 20 very, very specific things that are now, you have to do exactly this way, and that's what I want. So we get those two kind of, anything between that is probably fine. Anything between that of, this is not quite right, and this is why I don't like it. That's very important. These are the reasons why I don't like it. If you have then something that you do want to try, you can say, okay, well, why don't we try this concept, whatever it might be. The problem that we sometimes get is obviously if we don't get the feedback of what you didn't like about it or why you didn't like it, it's very difficult for us to come up with a better option, just because we're not sure what it was that you didn't like about it. On the other hand, if you're very, very specific with the changes, often that can sacrifice the overall impact of the cover, because we're trying to shoehorn, Frankenstein style, whatever it is, create this cover that you want in this very, very, very specific way, but losing sight of what the point of the cover is. All you need to do is get that click, right? All you need to do is get that click to the next page to see what the book's about. Don't focus too much on these elements that might be too busy, too cluttered. You don't have to give away the entire story on the book cover. It's so anything between those two extremes is probably fine.
So just to kind of summarize, we want to know what the problem is and then leave it to the designers to fix it. Don't be prescriptive about how to fix it. So tell you what's wrong and then leave it to your designers to figure out what's the proper solution. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, yeah, but also you can give suggestions on how you might prefer it, but still leave it open for interpretation, or give us options, right? Give us reference, but don't try to cram everything in. Just give us options, give us feedback that's tells us what you don't like about it, and maybe if you have suggestions, give us those as well. But allow us to work around those.
Well, one of the things I used to teach people when I worked a lot with agencies and was in marketing for big companies in tech was try and compare to the goal versus saying whether or not you like it, is what I used to tell people in that context. So if the goal was to create something dynamic and bright that looks fast moving, the feedback is this dull gray doesn't look like a fast moving dynamic thing, which was the goal of the design, versus I don't like gray. If you see the difference,
yes.
Like you're comparing to the goal as opposed to comparing the design against itself. Like if the goal is this, does it meet the goal or not? And why does it not meet the goal? At just different contexts, but I found that's helpful sometimes talking to designers, because it's not really about whether you like it or not. It's about whether it meets the goal of being a great book, a great cover for this book. Now, that actually became a challenge for me. We'll talk about testing, because I had one that I deeply disliked that was testing really well, and I was willing to go with it. Even though I didn't personally like it, because of that experience in design and marketing, I was like, okay, if it tests well, I should be okay with it, even if I don't personally like it. And I don't know if that was right. I feel like I got myself twisted around, and maybe I should have just been more like, I have to like the thing too.
Yeah, you absolutely have to like it as well, because if you've got to sell it, right? You've got to be the one that's promoting your book, right? And if you're not happy with the way it looks, the cover, you're always going to be promoting it kind of half-heartedly and not confident in it. And I think you have to like it as well as it being a genre fit.
That's really
good on the topic of feedback. Yeah, go ahead, Paulette.
No, I love that, because we did have a question on what should you do if you don't like it, to your point, but I love that reality that even if you don't like it, you're not going to really be pushing the story. You'll be disappointed, and that'll come through in your marketing. So that's a really excellent kind of like human aspect of
the
this.
reality. If you're with a big publisher, the reality is you may not have a lot of influence over your cover. I've talked to so many friends who are with really big publishers who've said that they got a little input up front and no input after that, and they weren't even allowed to have an opinion on it. And often if you really truly hate it, you have to have your agent advocate for you with the publisher. But it's not unusual to not have a lot of say if you're with a big firm.
Yeah, I mean, we work with big traditional publishers, and I mean that process is different to working with authors, but not that different. I think it really depends. I think probably depends on the publisher. But even within the publishers, that we have different creative directors from their side that we're working with, different art directors, and the feedback that we get from them is usually, we'll go through 2 or 3 rounds of changes from them to us, and then they'll present 1 or 2 options to the author, and then we'll come back with another 1 round of changes. But that'll be it. So I know for these publishers that we work with, they are presenting some sort of options to the author, but they certainly don't have as much influence as if they were just doing it themselves.
So in terms of feedback, should people ask for feedback from people they know, from other authors, from their mom, from their best friend? What is your take on who they should ask for feedback, if anybody?
I mean, they can ask whoever they want for feedback, but it depends who they believe, right? So family and friends are just going to say probably what they believe you want to hear, right? I think the best place to get feedback is from people who don't know your book, who've never heard of you, never read your book, but who are your target market, right? So if you can reach those people, those are really the best way to get feedback, and that's going to be through polling, advertising to the right target market. But yeah, so it's subjective feedback from family and friends. Not the best idea, really. I mean, it's fine, it's good, you do it. It can, make you feel good, but it's not going to result in actionable feedback.
Yeah, 'cause I think part of the problem is the people that you're asking in your family may not be your ideal reader. So you probably want to get as close to your ideal reader as you can. And that's, I think, where testing covers can potentially come into play. So I'm curious, Damon, what you recommend, from a testing perspective. And then I'd also love to know, Lainey, how did you approach testing your cover when you were working with the Damonza team? So we'll start with Damon, just what your thoughts are on testing.
So if we'd recommend testing, but we don't do it ourselves very often. We sometimes offer it. We use PickFu, which is the website PickFu, where you can put a few covers up against each other, or you can phrase different ways of questioning. But it's not cheap. It's maybe $80 or whatever it might be to test against 30 or 50 potential readers, and they've got limited targeting that you can use. They have sort of broad genre targeting that you can go with. Look, I'd say for the most part, you look yourself. You compare that, whatever cover that you get provided by your designer, put it up against the top covers within that genre. You compare it. See, how does it look? Does it look the same as those? Right? Does it not the same, but does it look like it fits on the same shelf as those? That's got to be your number one goal. I don't think you need testing necessarily to do that, other than your own eye, hopefully, and maybe ask. I guess it depends on the question, right? So if you can see it in yourself to ask, does this fit in, versus asking your friends and family, what does this cover look like? They're 2 different questions. So PickFu we use, and then it might be presenting 4 different covers and saying which is the one that you would most likely spend money on, not which is the best cover. It's which one are you actually going to spend $5 or $10 or $20 on if you had to make a decision.
Yeah, I used PickFu years ago for book blurbs, but I never thought about it for covers. So that's interesting. So Lainey, how did you approach testing when you were trying to decide?
So this is really interesting, because I did what I thought I should do and I didn't like the results. So what I thought I should do is exactly what Damon said, which is well, we're going to test clicks. We're going to do a Facebook ad. We're going to take the same copy and we're going to take the 3 covers that we're considering and we're going to put it on Facebook to an audience of women's fiction. And we're going to see which one gets the most clicks, with everything else being equal. So the only difference is the cover on the 3D book and each of the 3 ads that I ran. And I had 3 covers that I tested. I'm going to show you. I tested one this is actually the one that I didn't like. There is nothing wrong with this cover. It is a beautiful cover. But I was viscerally not loving it, and I couldn't explain to myself why. And later I realized it was a little too girlish, but I couldn't work it out at the time. Very good colors, exactly in the feminist fiction genre colors. And then I had this one that Damonza had done, which is beautiful. It's bold. It stands out. It's absolutely memorable. But what I was struggling with was, to me, it didn't look like it fit exactly in the same way in the genre. And then I had the one that was closer to what we ended up going with, which is a little bit color changed, but very close. And the interesting thing is, the one that I didn't like on the Facebook testing tested 3 times better than anything else. It got 3 times the clicks of the other 2 covers. And I literally wrapped myself in knots going, okay, maybe I just need to go with it. I don't love it, but maybe I just need to go with it, because clearly it tested 3 times better than any other cover. And then I don't know if it was you, Paulette, or someone said, have you tried it with your own newsletter subscribers? And I thought, I haven't. And these people know me better. So let's see if the results are any different if I put it out to 8,000 people who subscribe to my author newsletter. And the results were totally different. So the one that they liked the best, and I put out 4 options for them, the one that they liked the best was actually the cover very close to what I ended up going with, scored like 55% of people picked this cover. And this is an audience that knew me better, which is interesting, right? They knew me and my work better. So you could argue it both ways, right? But interestingly, the bold one that was slightly like, is it in genre, is it not in genre, scored second best. People in my newsletter list really liked this one. They thought it captured the tone of the book. It's a great cover. I still love it. And the one that scored the best on Facebook scored the worst with my newsletter list. Did not score high at all. Only 15% of people picked that out of, they had 4 options. So it wasn't like a 50-50 choice. So it was really interesting. And I only could conclude that my audience is not a general women's fiction audience, right? So when I put it out to a general women's fiction audience, that answer is different than putting out to people who are a little bit more honed, or a little bit more on the feminist side, or at least closer to being my readers. None of this is precisely exactly scientific, right? Like I'm sure you could design a perfect study that would go after the right audience on Facebook, et cetera, but it was fascinating to me that the real results were diametrically opposed, right? That the one that scored the best on Facebook testing with a generic women's fiction audience was not the one that scored the best when I went out to 8,000 people in my newsletter. And I got to thank my newsletter subscribers, because hundreds of people wrote in why they liked each one. They didn't just vote. They actually wrote, I voted for this one and this is why I liked it and why I didn't like that other one. And the feedback that was qualitative, that was what helped me make the choice. Because like I said, I didn't even realize why I had this one that I knew it was fine and it was a lovely design and I didn't personally like it. And I didn't realize it was because it felt girlish to me until someone said that in the comments. And I'm like, that's it. It feels too girly. But I couldn't get it. I just couldn't work out, like with fonts where I'm like, it doesn't quite look right, but I can't tell you why. Same thing. And they're all beautiful covers. The cool thing is Damonza gave me so many gorgeous covers, all of which could have worked, right? But I wasn't going for good enough. I was going for the cover that's going to do justice and help this book sell the way it could.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump around a little bit because we have so many questions. We don't have that much time left with Damon. He has a hard stop. So I'm going to steal a question from Lainey, which is a little bit more about Damonza in terms of, do you specialize in certain genres? If you can just tell us a little bit more about the work and the authors.
And I'm going to add into this one because Wendy Kenner in the comments asked, are there any genres you wouldn't do or any kind of clients that you would turn down? So this is actually very relevant to that question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question, Wendy.
No. So we work with all genres. There's nothing that we wouldn't do or haven't done. We tend to get more of certain kinds of covers than others, just I guess for a number of reasons. One would be word of mouth. We do a lot of fantasy covers. We do a lot of suspense thrillers. But what also tends to happen is, I don't know why this is really, but there might be some authors that are suspense thriller authors that would write 30 books, in a year, right? So we'll do all of their covers, or fantasy authors that might, it's the same. They're writing a lot of books, right? So they keep sending us their work. So we do a lot of those kinds of covers, but we do everything, right? There's nothing we haven't done that I can think of. I actually, what did I get the other day? I thought, oh, this one's unusual. I think it was mythology. It was a mythological sort of / history, and it was like, okay, we haven't done anything like this before. So it does happen, but I mean, we work with everyone and everything. We don't really have any genres that we specialize in, but we do tend to do more suspense, thriller, fantasy, probably than any other. Although it's changing. Lately, we've had a lot more nonfiction, to be honest, a lot more sort of business, self-help memoirs that have come in.
And you've done quite a few women's fiction recently. I know at least 4 authors have done women's fiction covers with you.
Yeah, sure. We do everything right.
So what about series? I'm skipping. We're skipping around and stealing each other's questions now. So what about series? Because Paulette is the series girl here. She's the one who's got the series. But are there special considerations if you're doing covers for a series that you might want to know up front or think about?
Yeah, it's good to know. I think we don't normally take it into consideration when starting the series. I maybe we should, but we tend to happen is we design the first one on its own as a beautiful cover as much as we can, and then we make sure that the rest of them follow on from that first one. It's not, unless we're getting, I guess, an order of 3 or 4 of them at one time, then we might do that. But normally that's not how it works, right? Normally we'll get given one cover and then we're told, okay, this is going to be the first one in the series. But we don't think about that. We try to make that one cover beautiful and effective, and then we just make sure that the ones thereafter match. And that will be through the typography, the style, the color combinations that we might use. And doing it this way has worked for us, so we just stick with that.
So what do you think is the right time to start working on a book cover? And, so that's part of it. And then also, how long does it take to work with your team?
I would say probably 2 months before you're looking at releasing your book would be a good time to work on the cover. So from our side, we provide the first drafts within 2 weeks, right? So 2 months is probably a good lead time because it gives enough time for changes and all kinds of things, and who knows what might happen. Maybe, it goes through many, many rounds of changes. Probably for the most part, the process takes 3 to 5 weeks, let's say, for most covers from our side, but it could take longer. So I would build in 2 months. I would say, don't announce anything. Just get the cover finished and then decide when you're going to do your launch and all of those bits and pieces. But if you have to kind of have these hard dates from it, I would say build in 2 months from your release date, or, to get started on the cover process.
And for people listening, just think, if you're going to put your book up on pre-order, or if you're trying to make an award program or whatever it is, you need to plan in advance. So although, the Damonza team takes 2 months, you might want to plan, figure what are your key hard dates and then back out from there.
Right. So you might be 2 months, but then you've got a pre-order period of 2 months after that. So you need the cover before the pre-order starts, for example.
For me, I had my book up for a year, so I needed the book way in advance of that.
So this is a bit of an odd question, and then we'll wrap things up. So for someone who's with a traditional publisher, it is a little different in that, when you're an indie, you get to completely have a say over your cover. You get to design your cover working with an agency or working with an individual designer. For people with a big publisher, they get to give input to their publisher, and then the publisher works with the design team. Is there any advice you would give people who are working with big publishers on how they can kind of set themselves up for success from the start in terms of the input that they give their publisher?
I can't answer that question. I don't know the relationship between an author and a traditional publisher. We've just never seen it from that end. So we're either getting, the order coming from the author or from the publisher. But that specific relationship between the publisher and the author, I don't know how it works. I don't know how much input they get at that in the beginning. I guess, give comps, provide comps with that you like, give as much information about the things that you like, and hopefully the publisher takes it on board.
Yeah, I think comps and I think tone really matters as well. I will say that I have some empathy for publishers, and I saw that my last publisher, the Wild Rose Press, their input was, like, tell us the tone, tell us one element that might belong on the cover, but only one. And I knew exactly why they were saying that, because it was what you were saying earlier, Damon, when you're in debut author and you're like, my book has a necklace and it's blue and it takes place in the park and there's a bandstand and there's a hummingbird and there's this and there's that. And the author wants it all on the cover. And I liked when you said earlier, like, no, that's a horrible, horrible idea. Don't ask for that.
And I'll tell you, that's actually quite an interesting point that you just mentioned there that I probably should have brought up earlier, is that you'll find many, many cover designers that will try to do all of those things. And they will try to put all of those things on your book. And at the end of it, you've got a cover that has all of those things on it. The designer's done exactly what you said, but it doesn't work, right? It's too much. It's too busy. It's too cluttered. It's confusing to look at. And it's nobody's fault. It's just the way that it's happened. And you need a good cover designer to be able to edit that all down into something that actually works for your book.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time here because I know you've got another engagement to get to. Do you want to just talk a little bit more about Damonza and I know you've got a long backlist of clients waiting to work with you and it's busy, but like if folks do want to work with you, but also maybe some of the resources that you make available. You've got these great genre guides, for example.
Yeah, we've got genre guides that I put together a little while ago to kind of, as much as I could at the time. It took a while. So what works within each genre, what to look out for in terms of your cover, if you're designing it yourself or if you're briefing a designer in, this is the kind of information that they need, and these are the current trends as they are at the moment. We also offer the free book cover review that I do. It's quite a detailed review where I look at your cover and I compare it to the traits, the tone, relevance, attractiveness, interest, and typography. And I also compare it to the other covers within the genre, so you can kind of see how your cover stacks up against those. We've got a free ISBN barcode generator on the website. That's new. Have a look at the website. There's a lot of information there, damonza.com. You'll find the place to get the free review there and the genre trend guides at the bottom.
And I would just encourage folks, I had a great experience. Your team were fabulous. I think I was a difficult client. Not that I was being a pain in the ass, but I think my cover was a difficult one. It wasn't obvious what the right cover for this book was. And I struggled with comps and I wasn't able to start off with just make it like this other book. And so I thought the team did a just fabulous job and were incredibly patient and worked with me through each stage. And so I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lainey. It was great to work with you as well.
And next month, we have a really exciting episode coming up, which is all going to be about, and it's interesting that Maggie Smith is commenting about the timing and how long you need to be on pre-order, and much longer than we said. And I tend to agree with you, Maggie. Maggie Smith just brought out a fabulous thriller, and next month's episode is going to be all about thrillers. We're going to have one of my favorite authors, Kimberly Bell. We're going to have Salima Ishka, who is really doing a lot of fun things with thrillers on TikTok. So I'm really excited to have kind of both of them, because they're going to bring kind of the big traditional angle of a big successful traditional thriller author with Kimberly Bell, and Salima, who's just taken off like crazy and done some really interesting things on TikTok with thrillers. So I think if you're interested in what it looks like for a specific genre, this is going to be our first genre specific episode where we dig specifically on thrillers. And I think it's going to be a really fun one. So that is what's coming up in October. And Damon, we'll let you get back to your day because it's tomorrow for you in New Zealand.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you,
Damon.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Everyone for joining and asking questions, and we'll see you on the next episode.